For the extra credit, I just wanted you to play around with the suspense and error boundary positions, and that's what we've got right here. So let's start with the suspense position. So if I move this suspense position all the way around and just wrap everything and then save that, let's take a look at what happens when we're loading. So I go Pikachu, and what in the, oh my goodness, Charizard, holy mackerel. Okay, so that's probably not what you're looking for. What's going on here? Okay, so the suspense boundary can be a boundary for anything in the tree at any depth. And so anything in here that suspends is going to look for the nearest suspense boundary, and React will render the fallback instead of all of its children. So it'll just swap its children for whatever the fallback is. So that's what's going on here, is we're just basically changing out our entire app for the Pokemon info fallback. Now that's like fine, we can make that work. If you really want to position things in this particular way, what you're going to need to do is, let's just wrap it around here, and we can actually add this Pokemon info class div around our fallback, and now that actually is going to look exactly like it did before. As far as the user's concerned, that's all that's happening, but we're actually swapping this React element for this React element, but it ends up being 6s anyway. There is an interesting implication by moving the React suspense boundary outside of this Pokemon resource, which we'll talk about in a future lesson. And I'll just mention that the Pokemon error boundary is exactly the same situation. So if I were to move this out, and we'll move this one all the way out, then that works just fine. But if you make some sort of typo, then you're going to replace the entire contents of the children prop here with whatever it is the error boundary is going to render in its place, which in our case of the Pokemon error boundary, just diving in here a little bit, we have the error boundary that's coming from React error boundary, and that's going to render this error fallback, which ends up being this alert. So it's important to keep in mind that the placement of your boundaries, whether they be error boundaries or suspense boundaries, has pretty significant implications on the user's experience when they run into those boundaries. I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting a React suspense boundary around every single component that suspends, just like I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting a try-catch block around every line of code in your application. You need to be thoughtful about where you place these different boundaries, and it's definitely something to experiment on a little bit.